Okay, so if you're an engineer or maybe a developer, or really if you just operate anywhere in the modern cloud, you're definitely relying on Redis.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those foundational pieces, almost invisible sometimes.
Exactly. Our sources are confirming this too. Redis powers something like 75% of cloud environments globally. It's that super fast memory store keeping everything zipping along. But, well, today we're diving into something quite unsettling. A really critical flaw, they've nicknamed it RediShell. That's CVE-2025-49844.
And the unsettling part.
It sat there, completely dormant, totally undetected in this core technology for nearly, well, 13 years.
13 years. That's quite a while.
Right. So we've pulled the latest info from Wiz, from Redis itself, and our mission here in this deep dive is really to get the facts straight.
Okay.
We need to understand why this thing got the maximum possible severity score, and crucially, what you, our listener, need to know right now about the exposure and the immediate fixes.
And we really have to start with that severity score. It's a CVSS 10.0.
The max.
The absolute maximum possible. And this is genuinely historic. It's the first critical vulnerability ever found in Redis.
Wow.
And for you listening, the impact isn't just theoretical. If someone exploits this, they get full remote code execution RCE.
Which means?
Which means they can basically take over the entire host machine. Complete control.
Okay, that really is the ultimate worst-case scenario. So let's unpack this timeline a bit. 13 years, it's still kind of hard to wrap your head around that.
It is.
Where exactly was this memory corruption bug hiding all that time? Through multiple Redis generations, even.
So the core problem is something called a use after free, or UAF, vulnerability.
Okay, UAF.
Yeah, it's a classic type of memory corruption bug, and they can be notoriously tricky to find. Basically, what happens is the program tries to use a piece of memory after it's already been released, freed back to the system.
Like trying to read a library book after it's been put back and maybe replaced?
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. The system thinks that memory location is available, but some old pointer still refers to it. If an attacker can control what gets written into that available space before the old pointer uses it.
They can insert their own code?
Exactly. They overwrite it with malicious code, and when the program tries to use that memory via the old pointer, boom, the attacker gains control.
And where specifically in Redis did this happen? You mentioned it hid for a long time.
It was hiding right inside Redis's embedded Lua scripting engine.
Ah, Lua. Okay.
Yeah, Lua is a really powerful feature. Developers use it to run complex logic right there on the database server itself. This flaw was just an artifact, sitting in that Lua engine code base for over a decade, like a silent time bomb.
So it really speaks to the complexity, maybe? Or how we analyze older code?
I think both. It highlights how complex memory management can be, especially in these embedded components. And maybe, a bit of a blind spot in how thoroughly older open source artifacts get scanned with modern security tools sometimes.
Right. So malicious control through the Lua engine, that's the crux of it. Let's walk through how an attacker actually goes from just uploading a script to getting that total host takeover. How does that work practically?
Well, the sources describe the attack flow pretty clearly. It unfolds in about 4 stages. First is the initial exploitation.
Getting a foothold.
Precisely. The attacker needs to connect and deliver their payload. So they upload a specially crafted malicious Lua script to the Redis instance. Now, critically, this requires authentication sometimes, but in many of the most dangerous cases.
The ones we'll get to later.
Exactly. The ones exposed online with no password. In those cases, the attacker doesn't even need to be authenticated. They just connect and upload.
Okay, so the script is uploaded. What's step 2?
Step 2 is the sandbox escape. That malicious Lua script isn't just any script. It's specifically designed to trigger this use after free bug we talked about.
The UAF law.
Right. Triggering that UAF is what allows the attacker's code to effectively break out of the Lua interpreter's security sandbox. The sandbox is meant to keep scripts contained, but the UAF gives them a way past those controls.
So they escaped the sandbox. Now they can run actual system commands.
Yes, that's the key. They can execute native code directly on the underlying server system outside the Lua environment.
And once they've broken free like that, what's the typical goal?
Well, that brings us to stage 3.
Yeah.
System compromise. Now they have unrestricted access or close to it. Their first goal is usually persistence and getting data out.
So setting up shop.
You got it. They'll often deploy something like a reverse shell, which lets them maintain access quietly under the radar. Then they start stealing things, SSH keys, cloud API tokens, any valuable credentials they can find.
And installing malware too, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Especially things like crypto miners. Redis servers are often quite powerful, making them attractive targets for coin mining.
Okay, so they have persistence, they've stolen credentials. What's the final stage?
The final stage is lateral movement. Using those stolen credentials or tokens, especially cloud tokens, those are gold the attacker pivots.
Moves beyond just the Redis server.
Exactly. They use the compromised Redis box as a launch pad to move across the network or deeper into the cloud environment. So what started as one database breach can quickly escalate into a much larger incident affecting the whole cloud account.
And that impact, that potential for lateral movement, it just gets amplified massively when you think about how widespread Redis actually is.
Precisely. That
Yeah.
75% figure we mentioned earlier, it means this isn't just a niche problem.
It's systemic.
It really is. And if we look at the exposure data from the Wiz research, the numbers are pretty staggering. They found roughly 330,000 Redis instances exposed directly to the public internet.
330,000. Wow, that's already a huge attack surface. But what about how they're configured? Is that part of the story?
That's the absolute critical part, and it's what really justifies that CVSS 10 rating. Of those 330,000 exposed instances, about 60,000 of them lack any authentication protection at all.
60,000 with no password, just open to the internet.
Correct. And remember, Lua scripting the vector for this exploit is enabled by default in Redis.
Wait, hold on. Lua is on by default, and exploiting it gives RCE, and 60,000 servers are just sitting there online with no password. Why would Lua be default then? That seems incredibly risky.
Well, it really speaks to that constant tension, doesn't it, between developer convenience and robust security. Lua is a genuinely useful, powerful feature for developers doing complex things with Redis.
So it makes Redis more flexible.
Right. And historically, the thinking was always that Redis, being this super fast in-memory store, would naturally sit behind several layers of network security, like firewalls and private networks. The security model kind of assumed a protected boundary.
But that assumption clearly breaks down.
It breaks down spectacularly when instances get deployed carelessly or, as we see often, when default container configurations accidentally get exposed to the wider internet. The ease-of-use default suddenly becomes a massive liability.
And you mentioned containers. That deployment context plays a big role here, too.
A huge role. The sources pointed out that something like 57% of cloud environments install Redis using container images. Now, containers are great. They often encourage using secure defaults.
Okay, sorry.
But developers sometimes skip the authentication hardening step in those container setups. They assume, oh, this container is running inside my secure VPC. It's fine.
Until it's not fine.
Exactly. When those default container settings somehow end up exposed publicly, maybe through a misconfiguration elsewhere, the risk just skyrockets. The attacker basically gets handed the keys. No password needed. Lua is already waiting.
So we can kind of categorize the risk levels here.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The critical risk tier, that's those 60,000 internet-exposed and unauthenticated instances. They are sitting ducks, immediately vulnerable.
Okay, what's next down?
Then you have the high-risk tier. These are instances that might only be exposed within internal networks. Still very dangerous, though.
Why high risk if they're internal?
Because they become the perfect pivot point. If an attacker gets an initial foothold anywhere else in your system through phishing, another vulnerability, whatever, finding an internal, unauthenticated Redis instance gives them a powerful launchpad for lateral movement deeper inside your network.
Right, makes sense. Now, Redis servers are known targets, right? We've heard about attacks like PDP-infect, Redigo, Headcrab.
Sure.
Those malware campaigns often hit Redis.
They absolutely do. Redis is a frequent target for cryptojacking and botnets.
So, given that, how sure are we that this specific flaw, RediShell, hasn't already been used, even if there's no public proof yet?
That's a really important question. And you're right, Redis is constantly under attack. However, as of the public disclosure date, we're talking early October 2025, the security researchers haven't found any public evidence suggesting RediShell itself, this CVE 2025-49844, has been exploited in the wild.
Okay, so maybe a small window of opportunity.
Exactly. A critical, but likely very narrow window. Because once proof of concept exploits start circulating publicly, and you can bet they will, we're going to see attempts at mass exploitation surge.
Which means the urgency for mitigation is
paramount. It's immediate.
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay, that brings us straight to action then. Patching is obviously urgent. But thinking longer term, beyond just this one fix, what are those fundamental security changes organizations need to make so their Redis setup isn't one of those 60,000 exposed ones?
Right, patching first. Absolutely non-negotiable for everyone running Redis. The fixes came out on October 3rd, 2025. You have to confirm you're running a patched version.
And that means checking specific version numbers.
Yes. You need to update across all the major supported version series. That includes the 7.2 series, 7.4, even the older 6.4 branch, and this applies whether you're on the open source version or one of the commercial editions. We'll link the exact versions in the show notes, but the main message is, update now, don't wait.
Okay, so patching plugs this specific hole. But like we discussed, the bigger problem seems to be how these things get deployed 60,000 servers online with no password. That points to needing fundamental hardening, right?
Absolutely. Patching is reactive, hardening is proactive.
The sources laid out 5 key steps for that hardening. Let's start with the most obvious one. Authentication. Enabling require pass. Why does this get skipped so often?
Honestly, it all comes down to friction, especially in development. Developers want things to be fast and easy when they're building and testing. Adding passwords feels like an extra step.
But that's just for dev, surely.
It should be. Once that code moves towards staging or production, enforcing passwords using that require pass setting is, well, it's the absolute bare minimum security barrier you should have.
So what's the pushback in production? Complexity.
Sometimes, yeah. Managing passwords securely, rotating them, it adds a bit of operational overhead. But honestly, that complexity is trivial compared to cleaning up after a full RCE incident.
Fair point. Okay, step 2 was restricting access. Firewalls, yes, but how do you make sure Redis is only talking to the things it's supposed to?
You need aggressive network segmentation. Rule number 1, Redis should almost never be directly accessible from the public internet.
Unless there's a very specific reason.
A very specific, well-justified reason, and even then, only through extremely strict firewall rules, like limiting access to specific IPs. For everything else, use firewalls and things like virtual private clouds, VPCs, to lock down Redis access. Only trusted hosts and applications within your own network should be able to reach it. It's defense in depth.
Okay, third point. Minimizing privileges. The idea here is if an attacker does somehow break out of that Lua sandbox, you don't want them landing on the system with God mode.
Exactly right. Always, always run the Redis server process itself as a dedicated non-root user account.
Limits the blast radius.
Precisely. If the attacker compromises the Redis process, they only get the permissions of that user. If that user isn't root, their ability to mess with the rest of the system, install rootkits, or pivot easily is severely hampered.
Makes sense. Number 4 targets the root cause of this specific vulnerability, the feature itself. If you don't actually need dynamic scripting,
then turn it off. It's often the simplest and most effective security move. Just remove the attack surface altogether.
So disable Lua.
Yeah. If your application doesn't rely on running server-side Lua scripts using the eval or evalsha commands, disable those commands completely in your Redis configuration. If the feature isn't enabled, this 13-year-old bug simply can't be triggered.
Easy enough if you don't use it. Okay, finally, step 5. Monitoring. What should admins be actively looking for in their logs if they're worried someone might be trying to exploit RediShell?
Active monitoring is your last line of defense, or maybe your early warning system. You need to set up alerts for suspicious stuff.
Like what specifically?
Look for any signs of unusual or unexpected Lua scripts being executed. Watch for unauthorized changes to the Redis configuration. And definitely monitor for unexplained crashes of the Redis process.
Crashes could be a sign.
Oh yeah. An unexpected crash is a classic indicator that someone might be attempting memory corruption exploit. They could be probing, trying to trigger that UAF bug, maybe not successfully at first, but the crash tells you something bad is likely happening.
Okay, good indicators. So let's quickly recap the core facts for everyone listening. We're dealing with a vulnerability that scored a maximum CVSS 10.0.
The worst possible score.
A flaw that was literally hiding in plain sight for 13 years inside one of the most critical pieces of cloud infrastructure.
Used by maybe 3/4 of the cloud?
Leaving, most critically, 60,000 servers completely exposed online, no password, vulnerable to full remote code execution.
It's a stark picture. And this whole incident is really a powerful object lesson, isn't it? It tells us a lot about the systemic risks baked into the modern cloud.
Our reliance on these core components.
Our deep and sometimes unexamined reliance on foundational open source software. When something like Redis, something so fundamental, turns out to have a critical flaw like this, the ripple effects are just huge and immediate.
And that systemic risk is what motivates efforts like Zero-Day Cloud.
Exactly. That kind of systemic threat is precisely why initiatives like Zero-Day Cloud exist, these cross-industry collaborations focused on finding and fixing vulnerabilities in the critical open source software that, frankly, everything else depends on.
Okay. So what's the final thought for you, the engineer, the administrator listening to this? We started with that shocking timeline. 13 years this flaw sat undetected.
Hmm.
Now, if a critical RCE vulnerability, one that allows complete system takeover, could hide for over a decade in a component used by literally 75% of the cloud,
Yeah.
it kind of forces you to ask a tough question, doesn't it?
What else is out there?
Exactly. What other similarly aged, maybe forgotten, undetected time bombs are lurking right now just beneath the surface of the software stacks we all rely on every single day?
Yeah.
So definitely go patch your Redis instances immediately. But then maybe start digging a little deeper into those older, quieter dependencies in your own environment. You never know what you might find.